Consider this situation. Beyond 70% of motors experience reduction equivalent top 30% of their capabilities prior to reaching 100,000 kilometers. Yet the vast majority of vehicle operators remain completely oblivious regarding this occurrence. Every excursion, microscopic carbon accumulation, sluggish detection devices, and neglected servicing silently diminish your motor strength, converting seamless operation into sluggish reaction and mounting consumption expenses. However, here's something unexpected. You genuinely don't require complete reconstruction or substantial expenditure addressing it. Throughout this presentation, I'll demonstrate 15 straightforward and established procedures that'll make your motor function as though recently manufactured, quieter, more powerful, and considerably more economical. And honestly, the concluding recommendation is something service professionals seldom discuss: the undisclosed technique that transforms even deteriorated motors to manufacture condition performance. Recommendation 15. Cleanse the mass airflow, commonly abbreviated as MAF, detection apparatus. Visualize your mass airflow detector as your motor's breathing supervisor. It communicates to the computing module specifically what volume of atmosphere enters the mechanism, enabling it to provide the appropriate quantity of combustible liquid. Whenever it remains uncontaminated, your automobile feels activated. Continuous regular operation, responsive throttle motion, and excellent consumption statistics. However, whenever that detector accumulates contamination, circumstances deteriorate progressively. Carbon debris, petroleum residues, and contaminants originating from atmosphere entrants might coat its microscopic sensing components, producing incorrect information. The consequence: unsteady continuous operation, diminished acceleration capability, inadequate consumption statistics, and occasionally that bothersome illuminated management indicator flashing, resembling an alarm you wish you'd taken seriously. Here's methodology for restoring it to proper condition. Initially, discover and disconnect the detector. It's typically positioned near the atmosphere filtration enclosure. Cautiously extract it, remembering it's vulnerable and financially costly to substitute. Employ exclusively MAF detector cleaning substance. Never implement brake cleaning substance or pressurized atmosphere. Dispense the substance directly onto the detector's sensing components or coating. However, don't physically contact or scrub. Merely permit the cleaning substance to perform its function. Subsequently, permit it to evaporate completely prior to reinstalling. Execute this every 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers or whenever you replace your atmosphere filtration. It's a brief 5-minute procedure that may instantly recuperate misplaced strength, enhance consumption, and transform your motor to feel recently manufactured. Recommendation 14. Cleanse or substitute the atmosphere filtration apparatus. Your atmosphere filtration apparatus is the overlooked protector of your motor's breathing mechanism. Each moment your automobile operates, it draws in enormous quantities of atmosphere, including with it particles, dirt, and microscopic contamination that might harm pistons, obstruct detection apparatus, and degrade functionality. Whenever your filter is uncontaminated, atmosphere circulates freely, combustible liquid consumes completely, and your motor operates robustly. However, whenever it's contaminated or obstructed, situations transform immediately. You'll sense sluggish acceleration, unsteady continuous operation, inadequate consumption, and occasionally that delicate struggling for atmosphere noise whenever you accelerate. It's your motor gasping for oxygen. The encouraging news: substituting it constitutes one of the simplest, least costly enhancements you're able to execute. A conventional paper-based filter expenses roughly $15 through $30, whereas reusable efficiency-focused filters like K and N fluctuate between $40 and $80 and might function for extended periods with sufficient cleansing. To substitute it, merely unseal your atmosphere filtration enclosure, typically maintained by several fasteners or threaded fasteners near the consumption hose. Extract the previous filter, eliminate any interior contamination, and position the replacement. No specialized implements, uncomplicated procedure. Execute this every 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers or sooner if you operate in sandy environments. It's straightforward servicing that can instantly enhance strength, intensify throttle motion, and make your motor inhale and function. Identical to recently manufactured status. Recommendation 13. Implement a combustible liquid injector cleaning substance. Your combustible liquid dispensing devices constitute accuracy implements engineered to scatter combustible liquid into your motor with excellent timing and equilibrium. However, as duration accumulates, microscopic carbon material and hardened deposits form throughout their interior, distorting that delicate dispersal mechanism. Whenever that takes place, the atmosphere and combustible liquid equilibrium turns unequal, generating unsteady continuous operation, inadequate acceleration capability, diminished strength, and deteriorated consumption. You might perceive reluctance whenever pressing the acceleration, or detect your automobile consuming more combustible liquid than standard. The encouraging news: the majority can be fixed without entering a professional facility. Obtain a dependable combustible liquid injector cleaning substance like Chevron Engineering, Lucas, or Seafoam, costing roughly $10 to $20 per container. Introduce it into your combustible liquid reservoir prior to refueling. Subsequently permit it to function as you drive. The cleaning substance breaks down carbon deposition and residue throughout dispensing devices, electromagnetic components, and burning zones, assisting your motor regain smoothness and strength. Utilize it every 3,000 to 5,000 kilometers for optimal results. However, whenever the buildup is persistent or substantial, a fundamental cleaning substance will not suffice. That's whenever you'll require a specialized cleaning procedure employing a pressurized mechanism and engineered cleansing liquid. This methodology applies cleansing substance immediately throughout the dispensing devices, eliminating stubborn contamination and hardened deposits, reviving that sharp, consistent dispersal mechanism your motor was engineered to deliver. It's a straightforward measure that can recuperate misplaced strength, enhance throttle motion, and make your automobile feel recently manufactured. Recommendation 12. Cleanse the acceleration mechanism enclosure. Your acceleration mechanism enclosure manages what volume of atmosphere circulates into your motor. Over extended periods, carbon residues and grime gather internally, restricting atmosphere circulation and generating unsteady continuous operation, sluggish acceleration capability, and inadequate consumption. The encouraging news: cleansing it proves less complicated compared to you imagine. You don't require a service technician or specialized implements. Merely a $10 container of acceleration mechanism, enclosure cleaning substance, and roughly 15 moments of your schedule. That's minimum time compared to beverage purchasing and might prevent thousands in restoration expenses. Whenever you cleanse that filthy acceleration mechanism enclosure, trio of circumstances takes place instantly. Improved atmosphere circulation. The acceleration mechanism component operates smoothly, enhancing atmosphere consumption. Enhanced throttle motion. Absent lag whenever pressing acceleration. Steadier continuous operation. The computing module gets precise atmosphere circulation information, avoiding unsteady continuous operation. Here's methodology for cleansing it sequentially. 1. Shut off the motor and disconnect the electrical source. Couple. Discover the acceleration mechanism enclosure near the atmosphere consumption hose. Trio. Loosen the connection fastener and extract the consumption hose. Quartet. Examine for buildup. Search for black or brown carbon deposits. Quintuple. Dispense acceleration mechanism enclosure cleaning substance internally and delicately scrub implementing a delicate fabric or cleaning brush. 6th. Manually release the acceleration mechanism component for cleansing both exterior regions completely. 7th. Permit it to evaporate completely. Subsequently reattach the hose and electrical source. Octave. Activate the motor. It might possess unsteady continuous operation temporarily as it recalibrates. If the acceleration mechanism component continues adhering, or you observe cracks or deterioration, it's opportunity for substitution. Cleanse your acceleration mechanism enclosure every 30,000 kilometers or sooner whenever indications surface. This uncomplicated procedure can recuperate misplaced strength, enhance consumption, and make your motor experience completely fresh. Recommendation 11. Execute internal carbon residue elimination. Despite sufficient automobile servicing, carbon material gradually develops throughout the consumption electromagnetic components, burning zones, and piston regions throughout intervals. It's a typical result of combustible liquid combustion. However, whenever it turns excessive, it generates unsteady continuous operation, pinging, strength reduction, inadequate consumption, and might activate the management indicator. Visualize carbon elimination as an internal cleansing treatment for your motor. It eliminates decades of buildup that restricts atmosphere circulation and combustible liquid movement. You possess a couple of techniques to accomplish it. 1. Self-implementation combustible liquid component cleaning. Implement a dependable cleaning substance like seafoam or liquili. They expense roughly $15 to $25 per container and get introduced immediately into the combustible liquid reservoir or consumption as instructed. These decompose slight through average deposits progressively throughout driving. Couple. Specialized walnut shell blasting. Regarding substantial carbon buildup, specifically on straight feed dispensing motors, consult a service technician. They apply pressurized walnut material to remove carbon from electromagnetic components safely. It's highly productive and expenses $150 through $400, contingent on the automobile. Execute carbon elimination every 30,000 through 50,000 kilometers or sooner whenever you detect unsteady functionality. It's a straightforward measure that can recuperate misplaced strength, enhance consumption, and make your motor operate seamlessly. Recommendation 10. Utilize superior combustible liquid. Here's something the majority of vehicle operators get incorrect. Superior combustible liquid doesn't provide your automobile enhanced strength independently. The reality remains, superior combustible liquid just has improved compression resistance, implying it avoids motor pinging. That tapping sound triggered whenever combustible liquid combusts prematurely. Therefore, except your automobile specifically demands premium compression or accelerated combustible liquid, employing superior won't magically intensify functionality. However, here's wherever the majority overlook the genuine factor. Combustible liquid excellence remains substantially more significant compared to compression rating. Economical, reduced quality combustible liquid consumes dirtier and abandons carbon buildup that obstructs dispensing devices, fouls detection apparatus, and chokes functionality. That explains why your automobile might begin experiencing sluggish operation or heightened consumption progressively. The intelligent selection? Keep applying top-level combustible liquid. It contains specialized cleaning components that clean your combustible liquid mechanism as you operate. Regarding supplementary enhancement, integrate a container of engineering substance or seafoam every 3,000 kilometers to eliminate persistent buildup. Whenever your automobile gets engineered for premium compression combustible liquid, consistently utilize it. It avoids pinging, safeguards your pistons, and guarantees seamless combustion. Because whenever your combustible liquid consumes cleanly, your motor doesn't merely operate, it flourishes, executing with equivalent strength and seamlessness it possessed whenever it was completely fresh. Recommendation 9. Sustain your ignition components and electrical ignition mechanism. Your ignition components might be diminutive, however they accomplish one of the most commanding responsibilities throughout your motor, triggering the atmosphere and combustible liquid equilibrium that sustains all operations. Every moment your automobile runs, those components ignite thousands of moments underneath severe temperature and mechanical stress. Throughout extended intervals, they degrade, their spacing expands, and the spark diminishes. Whenever that takes place, you'll sense it. Unsteady continuous operation, incomplete ignitions, sluggish acceleration, inadequate consumption, and in critical situations, motor destruction whenever neglected. To sustain your motor functioning robustly, examine and substitute ignition components matching your automobile's servicing timeline. Typically, every 30,000 through 100,000 kilometers, contingent on the classification. Consistently utilize the producer-recommended components. Utilizing incorrect classification might trigger incomplete ignitions or diminished functionality. Throughout that moment, examine your ignition electromagnetic devices and conducting wires regarding fractures, deterioration, or degradation, as a fragile electrical ignition mechanism can't transmit a potent spark. Contemporary ignition components and a wholesome electrical ignition mechanism indicate seamless commencement, improved acceleration capability, and cleaner combustion. It's straightforward servicing that may instantly bring back the strength and productivity your motor was engineered to execute. Recommendation 8. Examine and cleanse the PCV component. If your automobile possesses unsteady continuous operation, consumes greater quantity of petroleum compared to standard, or generates light smoke whenever you accelerate the motor, the source might not be something critical. It might be your PCV component asking for focus. This diminutive, frequently disregarded element quietly regulates internal container stress by directing unburned substances returning to the consumption for reapplication. However, throughout extended periods, it becomes obstructed with petroleum sediment and carbon deposits, disrupting your motor's breathing equilibrium. The consequence: inadequate consumption, petroleum seepage, sluggish functionality, and occasionally that delicate burnt petroleum aroma underneath the hood. Here's methodology for resolving it rapidly. 1. Discover the PCV component. It's typically fastened to a hose throughout the electromagnetic component covering or consumption manifold. Couple, extract it carefully, and oscillate it. Whenever it moves, it's functioning properly. Whenever not, it's definitely obstructed. Trio. Dispense carbohydrate or stopping substance throughout the component for removing contamination and residue. Quartet. Permit it to evaporate completely, subsequently reattach it firmly. A substitution expenses roughly $10 through $25, and the whole procedure occupies roughly 10 moments. Examine or cleanse it every 20,000 through 30,000 kilometers. This brief servicing measure can revive seamless continuous operation, minimize petroleum reduction, and support your motor inhale and execute like completely fresh. Recommendation 7th. Substitute petroleum on schedule. Nothing maintains your motor alive comparable to new, uncontaminated petroleum. It's the vital element that smooths moving components, decreases resistance, and transports away temperature and contaminants. However, as distances accumulate, petroleum breaks down and concentrates with contamination, metallic components, and carbon. Whenever that takes place, it can't safeguard your motor the manner it should, and deterioration initiates silently. You'll recognize ticking sounds, sluggish functionality, inadequate consumption, and ultimately expensive deterioration concerning pistons, attachment components, and electromagnetic components. Changing your petroleum on schedule every 5,000 through 7,500 kilometers for the majority of automobiles, or sooner whenever you operate in sandy or repeated stalling circumstances, constitutes one of the simplest yet most productive approaches to sustain your motor. Executing like recently manufactured. Consistently utilize the petroleum classification and filter recommended by your producer, and don't reduce on excellence. Visualize it like this. A $40 petroleum substitution may stop a $4,000 motor modification. Consistent petroleum substitutions indicate seamless functionality, extended lifespan, and a motor that continues calm, chilled, and powerful distance after distance. Recommendation 6th. Sustain your refrigeration mechanism in excellent status. Restricted elements terminate a motor quicker compared to overheating. Your refrigeration mechanism functions ceaselessly to manage temperature, flowing refrigerant substance throughout the heat exchanger, mechanical pump, and motor component for sustaining everything at that appropriate operating variety. However, throughout extended intervals, refrigerant substance breaks down, hoses deteriorate, and heat exchangers gather residue and oxidation. Whenever that takes place, temperature doesn't dissipate correctly, triggering overheating, deformed gaskets, refrigerant seepage, and perhaps motor collapse. To sustain your mechanism in optimal status, eliminate and substitute your refrigerant substance every 30,000 through 50,000 kilometers, or as instructed in your proprietor's reference. Examine refrigerant levels consistently, and examine the heat exchanger hoses and fasteners regarding fractures, protrusions, or seepage. Overlook not the heat exchanger cap. Whenever it's not closing appropriately, stress lowers and the mechanism can't refrigerate effectively. A container of superior refrigerant substance expenses roughly $15 through $25. And elimination needs minimum than an hour. Integrate that with uncontaminated hoses and a correctly functioning temperature controller, and your motor will continue chilled, productive, and protected. Sustaining your refrigeration mechanism in excellent status isn't merely servicing. It's insurance coverage regarding one of the most expensive malfunctions your automobile might encounter. Recommendation 5th. Substitute a broken or unsuitable combustible liquid container cover. It might look trivial. However, your combustible liquid container cover performs a vital function in maintaining your combustible liquid mechanism sealed and your motor executing effectively. Whenever the cover gets fractured, unfastened, or the improper classification, it permits combustible liquid substances to flee and atmosphere to penetrate, disrupting the stress equilibrium throughout your combustible liquid mechanism. The outcome? Minimized consumption effectiveness, unsteady continuous operation, difficult commencement, or perhaps an illuminated management indicator that leaves you wondering. Numerous vehicle operators invest thousands investigating phantom combustible liquid concerns whenever the actual problem concerns this $10 component. Here's what to execute. Examine your combustible liquid container cover whenever you replenish. Whenever it doesn't fasten employing that recognizable pressing noise, or you observe fractures, destroyed seals, or oxidation, it's moment for substitution. Continuously utilize the producer-recommended cover, considering an incorrectly matching one may generate equivalent concerns as a destroyed seal. A contemporary combustible liquid container cover expenses merely $10 through $25 and mounts in mere moments. It's one of the most economical corrections you're able to complete, yet it may improve consumption, stop vapor seepage, and deactivate that annoying management indicator, maintaining your automobile productive, uncontaminated, and executing like recently manufactured. Recommendation Quartet. Revitalize deteriorated components. Motors get engineered for extended operation. Certain readily exceed 300,000 kilometers. However, the diminutive components surrounding them don't distribute that matching endurance. Throughout intervals, they deteriorate, quietly diminishing your automobile's strength and seamlessness. You'll sense diminished acceleration capability, inadequate consumption, incomplete ignitions, and that formerly satiny operation commencing to diminish. Commence employing the fundamental elements, ignition components, electromagnetic ignition equipment, timing instruments, and consumption hoses. These constitute diminutive components that generate substantial influence. Deteriorated ignition components separately might remove your motor from approximately 30% of its strength. The greatest aspect? You're able to substitute them individually approximately $20, avoiding thousands in specialist compensation. Neglect not the supporting elements, electrical source, stopping mechanism, and substances. They each impact your motor's efficiency. And whenever you're identifying diminutive petroleum seepage, There's an uncomplicated remedy. Integrate a T205 motor closure compound to your petroleum. It revitalizes deteriorated seals and prevents seepage minus taking apart the motor completely. You don't require a completely contemporary motor for bringing your automobile back to functionality. Merely a handful of fresh components in the appropriate positions. Exchange the fatigued components, and you'll be surprised regarding how rapidly your automobile recovers that contemporary motor sensation. Recommendation tertiary. Cleanse and sustain your combustible liquid container cover closure. Prevent strength reduction. Prior to it commences, here's something the majority of vehicle operators disregard. Your combustible liquid container cover closure demonstrates greater significance compared to it appears. That diminutive synthetic component underneath the cover maintains your whole combustible liquid mechanism impermeable. Whenever it gets fractured, soiled, or solidified, atmosphere penetrates, combustible liquid substances leak externally, and your mechanism loses stress. The outcome: inadequate consumption, lengthier commencement intervals, unsteady continuous operation, and occasionally that bothersome management indicator regarding an evap seepage. Here's methodology for resolving it in mere moments. 1. Extract the combustible liquid container cover and examine the synthetic closure for fractures, contamination, or brittleness. Couple. Wipe the closure and entrance using an uncontaminated synthetic fabric. No intensive chemical substances needed. Trio. Whenever the closure seems fragile or flattened, substitute the combustible liquid container cover employing an OM component. Expenses roughly $10 through $25. Quartet. Consistently fasten it till you sense the trio presses. That's your closure securing in. A uncontaminated, wholesome combustible liquid container cover maintains your combustible liquid mechanism sealed, your substances reduced, and your functionality steady. It's amongst those diminutive servicing secrets that may create substantial impact, conserving you combustible liquid, strength, and unexpected restoration costs. Recommendation secondly. Terminate diminutive petroleum seepage. That delicate petroleum spot underneath your automobile might appear benign, however progressively, perhaps the smallest seepage might create inadequate petroleum quantities, inadequate smoothing, overheating, and expensive motor deterioration. The vast majority of diminutive seepage commence whenever synthetic closures and fastening components deteriorate from temperature and aging, permitting petroleum to ooze throughout fragile locations surrounding the electromagnetic component covering, petroleum container, or rotating component. Here's methodology for fixing it prior to it transforms pricey. 1. Examine your motor. Inspect encompassing closures, fastening components, and underneath your automobile regarding new petroleum deposits as well. Whenever it's merely a sluggish seepage, introduce a superior substance depletion additive, for example, T205, or completely satanic petroleum blockage to your motor petroleum. Trio. Execute the motor regarding 10 through 15 moments so the component flows throughout the mechanism, revitalizing solidified closures and terminating diminutive seepage. Quartet. Continue monitoring your petroleum quantity and driveway throughout the following handful of moments. Whenever the reductions cease, you've recognized it prematurely. Those components expense roughly $15 through $30 and might stop you regarding a $500 through $1,500 closure modification. Consistent petroleum monitoring and expedited solutions similar to this sustain your motor sealed, smoothed, and executing powerfully. Absolutely nothing problematic, absolutely nothing complicated. Recommendation primarily. Correct slackened hoses. Whenever your motor chamber ever smells sugary, resembling refrigerant, oily, or faintly resembling combustible liquid, that's your automobile alerting you. A slackened hose might be leaking. Hoses move essential substances resembling refrigerant, combustible liquid, and mechanical stress. And perhaps diminutive looseness might generate overheating, diminished functionality, difficult commencement, or deteriorated, a stoppage throughout the thoroughfare. Throughout intervals, temperature and oscillation transform clamp fasteners to slacken and synthetic hoses to deteriorate, fracture, or detach from their connections. Here's methodology for maintaining them firm and unfailing. 1. Examine all noticeable hoses whenever the motor is chilled, particularly near the heat exchanger, consumption, and combustible liquid rail. Couple. Examine regarding diminutive regions, fractures, or substance deposits surrounding junctions. These demonstrate early indications of seepage. Trio. Tighten slacken fasteners utilizing a fastening device or diminutive socket equipment, guaranteeing a snug, definitely not over-tightened attachment. Quartet. Substitute broken hoses instantly. The vast majority expense $10 through $40, contingent on the classification. Slackened hoses constitute diminutive concerns that may transform significant, rapidly. Maintaining them firm and uncontaminated guarantees your refrigeration, combustible liquid, and mechanical stress mechanisms continue sealed, protecting your motor from seepage, overheating, and pricey restorations down the road. And there you possess it. Uncomplicated secrets that may restore your motor back to functionality, minus emptying your monetary reserves. Whenever this demonstration conserved you intervals, finances, or frustration, execute me a preference. Press that approval symbol, adhere to for supplementary automobile conserving recommendations, and integrate a comment below regarding the strategy that executed most effectively regarding you. And don't stop there. Our successive demonstration discloses an uncomplicated automobile fixing technique that's able to revive your automobile for anything.